Hi, I am Director Chang. I'm very pleased and honored to be here today to have this conversation with the filmmakers of the new documentary Sky Blossoms. Please welcome producer Alex Lowe and the director, the award-winning broadcast news journalist Richard Louis.
What's up, Young? Good to see you.
What's up? Thanks for joining. This is so happy that we can have this conversation. There's much to talk about. Your film moved me to tears numerous points throughout the movie. Um, it's really such a inspirational documentary, and I wanted to just jump in with the first question, just get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Why now? Why this film now?
You want to go first, Alex?
Sure, and thanks, Young, for taking the time. I think very much actually like your film, Pandemic 19 has illuminated. It's really about shining a light on folks who are really heroic during difficult times like these. And with your film, Pandemic 19, Young, we see those care heroes in the medical space, which I think is where we're typically used to seeing them. But here you're seeing not only that same kind of work being done at home by care heroes, but you're seeing it being done by students in Sky Blossom. You're seeing it being done by kids as young as 12 years old, in the case of some of the families that we profiled in this film. So I think it's really about showing that heroism, inspiring others who are going through caregiving experience of their own, and really just shining a light to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's more to talk about, and I think as we navigate through this discussion, I would love to get to that imprint today. Given the pandemic situation we're in now, how the American health crisis is taking into account these caregivers and what's at stake for their current situations and how are they dealing with that. But we can talk about that later, I think, because I think before we dive into that. I have so much to ask you as first-time filmmaker, Richard. How did you get into the subject matter, and how did you find your subjects? Let's start with those two questions.
Yeah, I know. And your first question was really made me kind of think, because why now often is impossible to see. Because when we started 4 years ago, I mean, the idea was, I had lived through at that point about 5 years of caring for my father in California.
That's right.
And flying back and forth from New York to California, which kind of popped open my eyes and my heart, my brain. And then I started to see life in the world differently. And I realized that, that there are these heroes out there. We use it, and I'm very careful because we didn't use heroes, Young, in the very beginning, but today we are, after, as you were mentioning, living through very difficult times with a viral pandemic, and then as we live through what I call a selfish pandemic, where we saw people absolutely operating and thinking and treating people horribly, that when you see these students, it makes you go, we're going to be okay. Because a lot of times we're probably asking, all three of us, are we going to be okay? And that is really, I think, why you have done the films you've done, and what we're going to talk about in another session, but why these sorts of folks are so important, because we've seen so much of the other stuff. I think part of us, whether it's in our sleep or with our friends or our family, wonder whether the other side is there to combat this stuff. So that's kind of why it started, how it started, and we happen to be at the peak of this selfish pandemic. We happen to be at the peak in this last year, and so by hook or by crook, by complete luck, as you know, because you start so long back in the time frame, the fact that it may be a movie that's helpful for today. We're lucky, and we had no idea, being first-time filmmakers, certainly.
So wait, how far back did you start? When did the camera start rolling? Are we talking years
three
ago or?
three 3 years ago.
Oh wow,
But
okay.
then we started trying to sell the idea 4 years ago to get
Yeah.
the seed funding for
I know what that's like.
it. Yeah.
It
Woo.
it can take years, and
Yeah.
you got it together in a year, so that's pretty good. And then you rolled into production 3 years.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
and so I mean, the concept is, I mean, so first, like, why the four characters, and was it strategic because you wanted to cover the country, or how did you land these subjects? How did you find them?
Yeah, absolutely, Young. There was very much a strategic choice that was from the beginning made, that we wanted to make sure that we were covering every different region of the country, north, south, east, west,
Mhm.
Pacific Island. We wanted to be, and then we also want to be covering every major ethnic group in the country too. So it was really a film that was representative of what
Mhm.
the country looks like, and so that was very much in the DNA of the project from the beginning. And that's something that carried through. And that was the idea behind that, Young, is to show really the sameness actually between all of these characters. They come from different backgrounds, they have different traditions in their families, but
Mhm.
when you look at them together, you really see they're united by this common experience that they have as caregivers.
And
And
they're
that was some,
students.
and
And their
yeah,
students.
and
11
then their
years
age too.
old.
Yeah.
11 years old is the youngest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really you
Yeah.
see that commonality between everyone. And I
Mhm.
think that was something that was important to us to be able to share, that kind of common experience that we can all connect with. So, regardless of what you look like and where you come from, you can find a character here that you can relate to and say,
Yeah.
that's really someone who looks like me and is kind of going through this difficult experience, yet rising above it.
To me, also, it was a cross section of sort of the everyday person, the working class, the veterans, us, the located in what some would call flyover country. Like there's
Yep.
these are people that are not
Hmm.
necessarily going to get the voice and the time to be able to be upfront in that coverage. And so I was very interested as Richard, as a news journalist. You're the idea of your job is to hit those headlines, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I find that as a documentary filmmaker, the goal is to kind of rip that apart, in fact, to go deeper, and to allow empathy to come through in longer form storytelling.
Yeah.
uh what was your feeling, like, how, like, did you know that was the idea getting into these stories, that you were going to follow that through? And can you talk on that?
Oh Lord, I tell you, when we got my sort of news approach to, which is a breaking news approach with the long form,
Yeah.
that was I knew there was going to be a mixing of cultures that would be great. Kind of like
Yeah.
two different things coming together produces something great. 1+1=3. But there's always that back and forth in the beginning, and I think that what informed me was my desire to tell intersectional stories in news. So if I'm talking about unauthorized immigration, I always have 3 or 4 different types of faces. I just don't have Latino faces up there. I have Asian American Pacific Islander faces. I have African American faces. I have European American faces. And the point is not to say, hey, look at these different, I don't call them that. You
Yeah.
just see them. And we try to do that in the film. I don't ever say this is the African American family, this is the Latino family, and that's not the purpose. But we just you see it and you experience it with them, right? And I think that approach of trying to bring on that passive empathetic reaction
Yeah.
is so important. And so moving that into the film, and Alex was talking about the treatment earlier. Like, the treatment was my wish list. I had the thematic, and then I had like 30 crosstabs,
Yeah.
30 of them. And regionality was important. That's why we have Midwest, South, East, West, and Pacific Islands. We actually have one other geography that we're using for a different film, but that was the objective. And then to show all of the major ethnic groups.
Mhm.
And I think that the coming together, though, like, I like to hit the ground and I work from before I get up until after I go to sleep. And I remember when we first going through it, and because our typical breaking news crews, when we're out in the field, there are no 4 hours in a rest. It is just you go all day,
Yeah.
and you don't say anything. You sometimes eat, sometimes you don't, and like that's one example. And I laugh about that because it's not only that sort of work structure. It is also, there goes my ear. It's also, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
Good.
It's also, I'm so excited. My ear is squeezing out the AirPod right now. But it's also the editing. I mean, editing this for a year.
Yeah. Editing's for a year.
We're editing for 2 hours or 4 hours usually.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. That's a good question. It's a really good question, Young. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to go back to the cross-section idea, I mean, quite a diverse group of characters you follow, but and also interconnected, obviously through theme, through the just the fact that they're what they do, but also there's I find that their stories are dramatic. Each has a story. It's not just it's not saying that you just you found each group, but in fact you found stories that could evolve and move. I'm thinking of Bill and Jenna, for example, and just some of these Brian and Rihanna, some of these characters that you follow that give us a lot more than just just representation. It goes deeper than that, obviously. And there's no question there. I was just like,
yeah, but, it is. And in fact, the difficulty, Young, was showing something that you can't see. And this is film. And how do you show caring for somebody on film? Rihanna taking care of a father who has 2 types of cancer, right? 2 types of cancer. But our objective was, we got to show people what it means to take care of somebody else who's living through a disability. And we have to do it in a way that if you just look at the film, you go, oh, it's not there. But we know, because we're, me as a caregiver, Alex also is a caregiver. We understand what that third rail is, or that sixth sense is. And one of the devices we put in that we really leaned on, or we tried to, was animation.
Yes.
And as well with the score. And that's one thing we learned, by the way, through the process, Young, was that we spent a lot of time on the score and the theme songs, and we threw it into the documentary, and they were like, oh, you don't do that with docs. You don't go heavy. And I remember with Gene and
Gene,
I think
the executive producer.
Yeah, executive producer Gene, and as well Don, one of the producers, was like, y'all got to pull back a little. Y'all got to pull back. And we're like, all right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming at it from training that is not in the film, because I'm not a journalist, right? I approach things from my film school approach, which lacks the journalistic training that I think I then learned consequently just by the process. And that is about the moral, ethical questions you face as a documentary filmmaker, which is constant and evolving. And it's complicated. Like something that I admire with your work in this film is your ability, and I think it's, give credence to your work as a journalist, but how you interview. And so I'm always seeking advice and tips on how to interview properly, because I don't know how to do it. Do you have any, how do you do that? How do you get such evocative, moving, for lack of a better word, performances from your characters? How did you get to that place in those interviews? And can you talk a little bit about that?
I think in this case it was that I was a caregiver too, and these were very young characters, and interviewing Rihanna wasn't the easiest, and certainly Jenna and Darren and Camille weren't necessarily you put them on TV and they're hitting the ground running, right? And so I think just being very honest and calm and vulnerable myself. Like, I'm not going to be in control. I'm not going to ask the perfect question, but I'm going to ask the right question of my heart and yours. And I find that is, even in my work as an anchor covering breaking news stories. So for instance, I've done so many mass shootings in the last 2 years, and I've spoken to so many survivors that I think I realized along the way, it is, I'm okay. And I'm not going to ask you the perfect question. And I'm not going to sound like an anchor. I'm not going to sound like an interviewer. But what I am going to sound like is what my heart is really feeling right now. It's like, why were you so courageous amidst this? What is it that made you do this? And then asking it 3 different ways, or coming back to it, and being really comfortable with my imperfection as an interviewer. And I think that Young has given me a comfort of, I talk about transparency and authenticity. I think that is, after doing so many interviews in tough situations, when I'm sitting down with an interrotron, which, that really removes us from the interviewee, that had to come through even more.
Wow.
Yeah. I think, Richard, there were times on, when we were shooting this too, even with you having done so many hundreds of interviews, along your career, that even you were just shocked by how open some of these students were with us out there in the out there in the field.
Yeah, I was. Well, they're talking to this old guy. I mean, hey, what's he doing here? But
that has something to do. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, really quickly, I think that was just that. I think that shows how amazing they are.
Yeah.
Because I let them know straight, I'm going to be here from the beginning until the very end. And whatever you give me, I'm going to take care of. And I think I've done that so far. I did it through the edit process. As Alex and the other producers know, I stuck to what I knew was for them. And me being a caregiver for so long, I believed I could funnel and channel their energy into the edit process. And I let them know even today, that, I'm here and I'm not going to misrepresent you. I am not going to do that.
You totally feel that. You totally feel that from beginning to end. I felt there was a closeness and intimacy with them and their situations that made this a step above in terms of trying to understand perspectives. And I think it's a great accomplishment. And so I guess just to try to synthesize the ideas you just talked about, but basically, if I'm looking for the tips and the advice, it's basically that you kind of threw away I mean, I don't know, does it differ from your usual approach, and then if interviewing and interacting with the people you film,
Yeah. I think in news, it depends on the story. The stories that really kind of forced me to realize my own humanity were all of these tragedies where I'm on the ground and having to make sense of absolute messes around me into what was really happening. And amongst all the tragedy, and this is the problem sometimes, because what the stories I'll pitch are always very much the goodness of humanity amongst all the horrific humanity. And I sometimes move too quickly for that, but I think my heart wants to find that. And so I think with being comfortable in that space, allows or pushes me to look for the good stuff. Because what stands out for me amongst the shooting in well, we can pick it, the shootings in France or the shootings in Las Vegas are always those people that did something to stop it. The shootings in El Paso, Texas, where a family, a young Latino family with their 4 children in the back, and an old suburban going to warn other people about the shooter that's right behind them and that guy shooting at them, why didn't they just run away?
Yeah.
But they didn't. And that's like these student heroes is, well, you don't have to do this. You don't have to take care of your mom or your dad or your grandfather, but they do it anyway. And the thing is, there are over 5 million of them, but sometimes we oversimplify what people are based on whatever, because it's easy that way.
Right.
I walked away learning a big thing, and that was when I look at, especially students young, I look a little bit closer and I stop to think about, because we're older folks, me the most, is that we've learned to express ourselves, but students, and you remember back when you were a student in high school and middle school and elementary school, in Rihanna's case, you didn't know how to say stuff, and when you kind of were learning how to, you really didn't want to say it. So I'm looking a little bit deeper at the way folks are, and I need to, and I hope if you watch the film, that you do. Parents were saying, I'm looking at my kids differently now. Darren's mom, Jessica, after seeing the film, was like, I guess my kids are really kind of cool. Well, of course, Jessica. I mean, you live with them every day.
It's amazing. I mean, the load they take on. Also, that, as you're saying, the inertia they have to want to be the caregiver is a great maturity, and it's a way. Often ways we underestimate the ability of our children. Certainly, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and she walked in when I was watching your movie, and I was like, "Oh yeah, stay a while, let's watch this a little bit." And I want my children to see that in the characters you have in your film. Just their, the care is so essential, and it goes across ethnicity or whatever and culture, and that's what really stuck with me. Let's talk about, just flip a little bit and talk about today. Like I don't know if you describe America's situation as a healthcare crisis or not, but we are at a place now. Can you talk a little bit about how you are connecting things from this film into today's world?
Yeah, there's so many ways to do it. Alex, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Young, as I had mentioned earlier, I think it's really about now that we're we've brought in some of the lingo when we talk about the film now that's being used to describe the current pandemic. So things like terms like care heroes, you can turn around and say, look, these students at home are also care heroes. I think that's been one big change that we've shifted with, and how we describe these students, because that is just kind of the verbiage of the time. As far as the students themselves, now I think things have really shifted with a lot of their lives, because now as caregivers, they are dealing with so much more. Those challenges that they were facing before are magnified even more. And that is the same for anyone who's going through caregiving experiences right now. So many folks across the country are realizing, gosh, I am a caregiver, or I'm going through these experiences, or COVID has made me a caregiver. In fact, Young, we looked at the numbers and did some estimates behind how many caregivers new caregivers may have come out of the COVID crisis. And we found that it was something around 5 million or so new caregivers that have resulted from COVID. And because that's
from October too, right?
That was October. Like that. Yeah. So those are older numbers, and I'm sure has only increased more and more. But so many have found themselves in that position, or have found that their position as a caregiver has become so much more difficult as a result of COVID. And I think Sky Blossom can help to kind of speak to those experiences that all caregivers are going through. It's just the emotions, the difficulty, the challenges of it have just really become heightened, and it's something that I think people are just kind of realizing now.
Yeah, Young, and a lot of folks today are feeling like man, I feel like I'm in prison at home.
Yeah.
And for those families that have sickness in the family or disabilities in the family, even more, accentuated. And I think when you look at the students, our desire is to say, guess how they feel. Guess what they feel like when they're that age, stuck at what they think is they go to school and they are free as a bird, come home and they have this new job, this second life. And this second life is not meant to be poor me. It's meant to be an inspirational cry, because the hundreds of times I've seen it, I still, cry and tear up. And it's because I'm so inspired by the simple little things they do in even going through the edit, and so I think the objective is that, when you say bring it to today, is that we want today's students to know that kind of what that is that we're showing is good, and you can be it and accept it, and you can try to be like that, as opposed to the counter narrative, which is, if I'm mean, I get more attention. If I scream, I get more attention. If I go like this, I get more attention, the right kind of attention. And the characters were chosen because they're the opposite of that most of the time. They are kids, right? But most of the time, they're saying, I don't believe that. That's not the way that's not the way I should live.
Right. If anything, that is well, extremely hopeful, and as I said earlier, just very inspirational, because we've been really dragged through a lot of that other part of, the way the dark side of society, and I'm so happy, when you come upon a film like this, you really see there is a hope for the next generation. This is the generation, the children, the students. They're carrying forward these, the things that we need, desperately.
Absolutely.
Quickly, Joe. I think this film has just kind of been doing really well out there, and I know that there's a lot of great action happening around this film. So, would you mind talking a little bit about that? The release, some of the responses you've had with the film, and even within the political spectrum too. Yeah.
I could talk a little bit about some of the release, Young, and this film we premiered on Veterans Day in November over at the Kennedy Center, and we had this incredible premiere there where we brought in 50 cars there to do a big pop-up drive-in theater at the Kennedy Center, and it was just an incredible evening there. And the idea behind all of this hoopla, Young, is really, we wanted, despite COVID, we wanted to say, hey, we are going to give these students, heroes and caregivers across the country, really the celebration that they deserve. And that was an incredible launch. And on that same night, we had worked with Universal Pictures and AMC Theaters as community partners, and they put the film in 50 theaters in every state across the country. Just an incredible launch on that night to be able to share it with so many, and for so many to come out and support the film and these families. And for us as first-time filmmakers too, was just unbelievable. We had never dreamed of anything like that, I think, and certainly not to be able to do it during a pandemic, no less. We also had a premiere as well over at the historic Lemley Theater in Los Angeles, and they put us in their virtual cinema and has extended the run there. It's just really been unbelievable, Young. But I think for us, what's exciting, not just as first-time filmmakers, but as AAPI filmmakers, is really being able to get films kind of into the mainstream bloodstream. And I think really that theatrical release that we were able to have for one night only is really representative of that that shift. And one thing that we've learned recently is about, I think, 18 or 20 films, I think, by API filmmakers this
19.
year are 19. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
David Magdell.
Split the difference.
I attribute to David Magdell for that.
Split the difference. Yeah. In contention this year, though, for
it's remarkable. Yeah.
Which is just remarkable to see that. And to see films, you know, from API directors being able to get that kind of release and reception into the mainstream, you know, through Universal, through MTV, through, you know, other distributors, to be able to really be able to get the films out there, and how the voice is heard is just incredible. We love to see that.
I love the groundswell, and I think it should be the new norm. You know, it shouldn't be. I'm looking for the days in the future where there are 20 films by you know Asian Pacific filmmakers. It's just the way it is, you know. And it's not a question because you know it mirrors the demographic, you know. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say, you know, we certainly, Young, do not believe at all that it's like flipping that thing there. We know that. That's the only thing I have in my room. It's a really exciting studio here. But what I learned, you know, as I was reflecting, as Alex was talking, is, you know, it was because of our Asian American Pacific Islander community that I was even able to do the film. We were able to do the film. 4 years ago, it was because of Sue Van. It was because of Daphne Kwok. It was because of Don Young saying, "Go do it, go do it, go do
Don
it."
Young.
And then Jean. And then Jean coming to sit with me, you know what a downer she is. It's about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years ago, saying, "You can do it, do it, do it, do it." And then guess what? Ursula along the way, where I meet her for the first time. Come on down to LA. And then later on, they kept on. I see them kind of like, you know, I'm that really slow, out of shape runner at the 5K. And I'm running, but they keep on throwing me bottles of water and power bars because, my gosh, I don't know why you do this, Young. But
I don't know why either.
I have huge respect, is what I'm saying. And it's because of our Asian American Pacific Islander community and those who've gone before who have created things like ADOC, been successful like you, and been able to teach us the lessons. You know, first time, but not by luck, but by a lot of support. And then later on at the end of the journey, or I should say the last quarter, you know, you have folks like David who's in here throwing me those bottles of water still, throwing Alex the bottles of water, like, this is what you got to do, this is how you do it. Right. And so I don't take the very element of me looking like this lightly, because I've tried to own it and use our community, but go to the gray hairs, if you will.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, David. But the gray hairs and try to figure it out, because you and others have paved the way for us our new timers.
And in a way, so have you, though, Richard. I mean, you certainly have been instrumental in in the work you've done over the years, and for the community as well. And that's not gone unnoticed, I would say. And so that I think, I think it's just that circle that we're in that's wonderful.
Exactly. Right.
It feels good. It feels good now more than ever.
Keep on pushing, as I say.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I think we're winding down the conversation a little bit. I'm wondering if there's, anything you want to add to this discussion. You've talked about all the EPs in your film. I mean, there's quite a list of contributors, and I was very impressed that you've gotten everyone from Bing to Brian, who I know all these characters, and it's quite lovely to see that. Montel Williams, I see that, and it means that I think that that's a good stamp on the film too, that there is a lot of voices that want to carry that film through for you. And I don't know if you want to mention anything else.
Yeah, Brian and I were eating burritos in Chelsea, and I was like, "Hey, should I do this thing?" And he's like, "Well," and he's so calm. He was just like, "Well, this is what you think about. This is what you do." Yeah, and Montel and David Hyde Pierce, Linda Hope from the Bob Hope Foundation, all these people we feel very grateful for, and Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which kicked this off for me so many years ago to be aware of caregivers in military families, which we selected military families, but you can tell that it is a lot like our communities of color. We are people of color, but we're also more than that. And so are those from military communities, and that's what we tried to show. I mean, I guess the last point, Young, and I know we're wrapping up here, for me at least, is that we had to walk the talk. And so even though, we raised, I mean, it's about a, $2.5–3 million production, and you're probably saying where'd all the money go? That's okay.
No.
But we have 10 volunteers. I'm one of them. Alex is one of them for the entire film. It went all to the contractors and subcontractors. 94% of that which was raised, either in pro bono or otherwise, went to people of color or those who were in other words, gender or ethnically diverse. 94%. In the orchestra, 86% were gender or ethnically diverse. 100% of our core film crew were female. 100%. In the 15 years I've worked in network TV, I have never had a male DP. Well, guess what? For 3 years, I got to work with one, as well as my sound engineer and my AC, and that was our focus all the way through, is that we were going to walk the talk. Our composer is female. But again, they were just good as they were and happened to be female. I must underline that. Yep. And the thought that I get tired of hearing is that because you're X, then you're Y. When really,
I can't stand that.
Well, Richard looks this way, so therefore he's. I've never heard that at all. But in any case, we have to walk the talk, and we were lucky to pull the team together, and I'm glad we were.
Yeah, I can't give enough credit to the crew, actually. And Young, one of the questions you had asked earlier was about the interview process. I think one thing actually that came up to me like later here in this conversation was at the end of every interview, and this was an all-female crew that we had in the field. Richard, you as the interviewer would ask the crew, "Does anyone have any other questions for the interview subject?" And that's something I haven't seen on a set before. And the crew was they have developed such close ties with the families, and being out there in the field, and the trust and that they are able to build, and relationships there is so key to what you see on film. But but their perspectives, I think, added so much to this film and the process, and that I can't give them enough credit for that. And not only that, they're for us being first-time filmmakers, for being able to work with that crew, with their experience, as well as with all of the EPs that you mentioned, who were just so generous and supportive throughout this whole process. Without any of them, I don't think we would have been able to have done this, because we'd have no idea what we were doing. So they really made it happen, and allowed us to make our mistakes, but also to learn from them and to be able to put this all together.
Maybe before we wrap up, then, the question I do have is: have the subjects seen the film? And maybe you give us a little recap and update.
Yeah. What did your daughter think of the film? I'm joking. 2 out of 5 stars. Okay, all right.
She was moved. At 4, I mean, she was moved.
At 4. That was the response I was sharing earlier, in that they were fairly surprised about the way their families are. And, living in a family, we all get it. And I think for me, that was the success criteria for the film. For me, was strangely not being part of the typical arc of a film. And what happened with COVID is now we're back into the arc of a film. But we did not begin that way. We were ready to launch in April, which was completely after everything would have happened. But because of COVID, we didn't. And so we were able to spend more time on it. And the families who got to see it were, as I said, surprised at who their children are. And I think a little bit more heartened about the beauty that their kids have, and they hug them a little bit differently. In terms of the kids, Darren's in college now. She was 15 when I first started interviewing her. Camille, not in college yet, but on her way. She has not been seeing her father and grandfather as much as of late. The Hawaiian family, they are fantastic. Kamaile and Kaleo, as Native Hawaiians, they were really representative of the strong culture and the hope that it brings to the country in terms of kuleana. And I really enjoyed that they shared that with us, but we've lost for now that contact with them, Young. And you know how it is with certain families and characters, they decide we've had enough of this, because it could be a little weird, all these cameras and stuff.
I know how it is. Yeah.
Rihanna also graduated on the same day her father graduated from community college. And now, even before COVID, was not going to class because of certain situations of bullying. That was on and off. Jenna now is she has another development in her family, and she just reached out to us 2 weeks ago, and I'm not sure if she's announced it yet, so I don't want to say what it is.
Okay.
But she's had yet another, and the reason being, as if you've seen the film, that will be an issue for her. So they're all just like Darren going to college is a whole thing. Yeah. I feel like they're all my kids.
Yeah.
And one thing I should add, though, with actually them seeing the film, is because we had that 50-state theatrical launch, many of the families were actually able to go see it with their communities.
Right.
And, they came on that opening night, texting us pictures of that and saying, wow, how much it meant for others there who were at those screenings to be able to say, you're doing something really incredible, and especially to the students there. So I'm really glad that we were able to make that happen, because had we not had that, I don't think everyone been able to go to DC where we were having that drive-in. So being able to give them that experience where they could really get that heroic applause that they deserve, that's just a really good feeling for us.
Well, I think we should kind of like end on that note. I think it you've made Sky Blossom such a emotional and an uplifting film. Gives us a lot of hope right now, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll be thinking of it and the stories of each character for quite some time. And so thank you for making it. Thanks for coming together for this little chat, and can't wait for more eyeballs, as they say on your film. So yeah.
Young, thank you so much, Young, for taking the time. Really, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.